Good evening and welcome to a new episode of the Business Insider. And today we have a lot in store for you in the episode. We're going to talk about the African Import Bank and the annual meeting that's taking place in Cairo. We're joined this evening by Dr. Hassan Al-Ghazzawy, an energy and industry expert. Good afternoon, rather good evening to you, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Before we start getting into the idea and the importance of this bank, we're just going to take a look at a report about it, where the African Import Bank in its 8th annual meeting in Cairo has set out an ambitious plan to stimulate expansion and create a diversified and developed form of African trade while operating as a socially responsible financial institution. The bank aims to pump billions of dollars in the continent in the next few years. Here's the report.
The African Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, aims to pump $20 billion to support intra-African trade, according to a chairperson of the bank, Benedicta Orama. In Orama's speech during the bank's 29 annual meetings for 2022, he added that the bank has pumped $20 billion over the past 5 years to support African trade. He stressed that thanks to the increase in the bank's capital, the bank has supported trade in addition to supporting projects and infrastructure and supporting contracting companies that have projects in the continents, noting that the bank has pumped $8 billion on to support projects. Chairperson of the bank indicated that the African Import Bank launched in December 2021 a facility of about $7 billion for central banks and small and medium-sized enterprises in order to confront and reduce the effects of the coronavirus pandemic, and it also launched efforts to provide vaccines against this virus in African countries, adding that the bank responded quickly to the African Union's call to raise $2 billion in the form of a guarantee facility so that Africa can purchase 400 million doses of COVID vaccines. The Russian operation in Ukraine has posed a crisis to the African continent, posing many new challenges and difficulties in accessing grains, agricultural fertilizers, and staple goods that many countries of the continent suffer shortages of. Orama stressed the need to implement the African Free Trade Area Agreement, pointing at the same time to the obstacles to the movement of goods and commodities from Cairo to Cape Town. Orama added that the bank has made a remarkable progress towards implementing the African Free Trade Area project through the African Trade Portal, which was launched during the trade fair that was held in Egypt in 2018, stressing at the same time that the Afrexim Bank will continue to support trade in the continent and abroad. Yet, despite the challenges faced, Mohamed Maid, the Minister of Finance and the chairperson of the General Assembly of the African Import Bank, said the bank had achieved good financial results throughout the past 2 years despite global challenges. Its income increased by 15% in 2021 compared to 2020. Shareholder participation increased by 17%, and the capital of public money also increased to $2.6 billion to meet the requirements of member states in dealing with global shocks. He pointed out that the bank also managed to implement the 5-year plan from 2017 to 2021 and launched the new strategy from 2022 to 2026. Also, about $291.8 million was injected to develop and automate the bank. This contributes to strengthening governance and achieving the targets. He noted that the volume of the bank's joint cooperation with Egypt amounts to $6.5 billion in all sectors. Benedict Orama had earlier stressed the importance of support given by the Egyptian contractors in establishing power stations in South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as well as in Angola and Zambia, expressing at the same time This is in addition to the Egyptian Bank du Caire is one of the entities that are supporting the bank, announced an increase in its investment in the African Export-Import Bank, Afrexim Bank, by $82 million, bringing its total investment in the bank to about $115 million. Also, Chairperson Afrexim Bank Orama indicated that the bank is providing support of about $2.9 billion in Uganda for a project to generate electricity, stressing that the Egyptian company, Arab Contractors Company, is the main component of the project.
Welcome back. We're joined by Dr. Hussien Ghazzawy, an energy and industry expert. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Can you tell us about the importance of having this meeting and its importance during the time of post-COVID crisis, in addition to food shortage and security problems?
The meeting is very important. It's the first meeting after the pandemic, so it's and also I think the place is very symbolic.
Yes.
Took place at the administrative capital, and actually it demonstrates that Egypt have a track record when it comes to infrastructure, building new cities, which what Africa actually needs. There is a lot of challenges with Ukraine-Russia crisis, and I think the timing wouldn't have been better. And I had the pleasure and the honor to speak in one of the roundtable at the annual meeting, and it was very interactive. A lot of presence, and everybody was impressed of what Egypt have done as far as the infrastructure concerned in the last 7 years.
Yeah, the chairperson actually did speak about the help that Egypt and Egyptian contractors have provided to a number of African countries. How important is this to strengthen inter-African trade, and is there more of this in the future?
Definitely. Figures when it comes to the intra-trade between African countries is very disappointing. We're talking about 15 to 16% at most.
Yes.
Compare if we look at Asia, we're talking about 59, Europe almost 70%, and that's why the African Free Trade Agreement came in effect. So far, 43 countries signed out of 55 African countries. It is very important during the meeting, and I would like to repeat what was saying. It is the second liberation of the African country.
Yes.
Africa needs this free trade agreement. We cannot carry on having just 15% intra-trade. Africa cannot sustain just exporting raw material. Almost over 68% of Africa export is raw material, and we import final products. You multiply it by 5-10 times more. So I think it is definitely very important, and the Afrexim Bank is playing a very active role actually in promoting the AFCFTA, the trade agreement. They plan to have $20 billion spending over the next 5 years to support the African countries in establish the trade agreement. Very important thing as well I'd like to share is the power of youth. It's very important and was highlighted in the meeting, and along with the empowerment of women. It's Africa, I mean, 50% of the population is women, over 60% of the population youth. So we need to benefit from the youth power, and the empowerment of women in Africa.
We've seen in the African continent, and I believe this was something that was discussed as well during the annual meeting, when COVID hit and the vaccines were starting to be available, African continent was unable to secure vaccines as quickly as developed nations have. Do you think that Afrexim will be the solution for future problems like this? I mean, they've managed to secure 400 million doses, obviously, but will pumping more money into it help prevent these issues in the future?
Definitely, but I think there has to be a way of just pumping money. If we talk about the pharmaceutical industry in Africa. Africa imports $16 billion every year of pharmaceutical. And if we look at did the pharmaceutical, the European and American or whatever invested in having manufacture in Africa? Not necessarily. Actually, Egypt is one of the most advanced country when it comes to pharmaceutical industry, South Africa as well, Nigeria. So it's about time for Africa to manufacture pharmaceutical. Yes, the African Bank did an outstanding job by securing the vaccination, but we don't want to be in this situation anymore. Africa need to have their own pharmaceutical product, need to have their own vaccine. We cannot be at the mercy of anyone. So yes, investment is important, but has to be a structured investment rather than just short-term or firefighting to buy vaccine for 400 million, which was needed at the time, but we need to learn from this experience and plan ahead.
Yes.
And countries like Egypt and the other have the existing pharmaceutical infrastructure to help with that.
Yes. Do you think that the Indian example when it comes to creating pharmaceuticals, when it comes to vaccines, is something that the African continent can learn from?
Of course, and we have the resources, we have the people. If you look at the people working in pharmaceutical companies all over the world, there is a lot of Africans. So we just have to have the will and the plan to have our own pharmaceutical industry. We cannot survive just on the mercy of other countries.
The world currently is also facing energy issues and food security issues as well. During the meeting itself, they spoke about providing food security when it comes to combating food scarcity by creating more agricultural lands. How does the bank plan on doing this? And it's a bit surprising that the African continent finds it difficult to create agriculture since it's a very fertile land.
So you mentioned energy and food. So
yes.
I'd like to share some numbers,
yes.
very shocking numbers.
Yes.
When it comes to access to electricity, we have 580 million Africans, especially in Sub-Sahara, don't have electricity. Yes. Out of 770 million all over the world. So 75% of people without electricity in the African continent, which is very disappointing, and it put a hurdle on the development and sustainable development of the country. We are 30 million square kilometers Africa. We have the most arable lands in Africa. But when it comes to agriculture or even fertilizer, we are behind. So actually there is a lot, and I think COVID and the crisis, Russia-Ukraine crisis, it's a good wake-up call for the African countries. We cannot continue and survive like that. I think the AfCFTA agreement is an outstanding platform to build on investment in both energy. If we talk about energy, Africa should not reinvent the wheel. We have, when it comes to solar and wind, we produce, when it comes to renewable, only from solar 1.5% of the worldwide solar generation, which is, if I compare what Africa produces of solar, just an example, is about 42 kilowatt hours in 2020, compared to over 920 produced by Europe, which they lack the solar.
Yes.
So when it comes to energy, I think example of Memban in Egypt, where you have 32 stations with 50 megawatt each, giving over 1,500 megawatt. We need to think more of this example, not necessarily at the scale of Memban,
yes.
at even a smaller scale, and allow SMEs to build smaller solar plants and to generate and distribute. That will help Africa to overcome the energy and definitely having more investment in agriculture, which is Egypt and other countries in the continent are doing now.
Yes. The bank is intending to, or has continued to, fund small and medium-sized enterprises. Am I correct in thinking this?
Correct.
And this is part of the solution.
Agreed.
What about the countries, other than the SMEs? Let's look at the countries in general. Some countries are better off than others when it comes to finances, and some aren't, and some lack the expertise. The countries that are more advanced when it comes to technology, doing with agriculture and energy production, will there be some sort of connections with the other countries to help them rise up and try to produce their own energy and provide more agricultural lands?
The fundamentals of the AFC-FTA agreement is to have the mutual benefits between all the countries. It cannot be one-way traffic. It has to be two-way traffic. You mentioned energy. Egypt has a surplus of electricity. We have a capacity of producing 58 gigawatts, and our needs, the peak, it's about 32. So we have a significant surplus. We have a track record when it comes to energy, and what you have said, it's happening. Egypt is supporting Tanzania building the dam, which will produce energy. In your report, in Uganda, to produce energy.
Yes.
South Sudan. So South Africa have a fantastic also track record when it comes to electricity generation. So the three mega or the biggest GDP generating country in Africa, Nigeria #1, Egypt #2,
Yes.
South Africa #3, and we cannot forget our brother and sister in East Africa, Kenya, Tanzania. I think these countries are advanced in energy, in industry, and we cannot allow to have 580 million African in sub-Sahara without energy or without food. We cannot rely on a 600,000 square kilometer country like Ukraine, where we have a 30 million square kilometers in Africa with the majority of arable lands. So we need to scratch our own back.
Yes.
And African Bank, with their annual meeting, I attended the full 3 days, and there is a lot of discussion going on, a lot of passion, a lot of new ideas, because I think with the pandemic and the crisis is two strong wake-up calls for African nations to make a change now.
They spoke during the meetings that they aim to pump about $20 billion within the next 4 years. Can you give us an idea about what kind of funding or what industries will be funded when it comes to the African continent?
Everybody realizes the value added of that. We need to have industry. We spoke about pharmaceutical.
Yes.
Energy is another one. Definitely the agriculture. So it is a very diverse. One of the issues actually stopping trade between African countries is the payment. There is the new payment system, not to cannibalize the existing payment system, but to complement what exists. And they said it's in 2 minutes, you can make payment from Cape Town to Africa, from Mozambique to Algeria, instead of 5 to 7 days. I think also we need to, the bank is doing a very good job when it comes to mitigating the risk in the investment in the African countries. And I will quote His Excellency the President when he attended the second day. Stability is very important for the African countries. This will only, we have the resources, not only the natural resources, but we have the human capital as well. We have the human resources, natural resources. We need stability, we need security, and Africa is the future continent, but we need to act.
Yes, it's part of the plan when they come to pump this money. I mean, obviously they're going to pump into industry as well, but will there be money allocated to building infrastructure like roads and railway systems?
Definitely. I don't want to give a shocking numbers when it comes to the infrastructure. Yeah. Africa need between 100 to 120 billion dollars every year for infrastructure. Mm-hmm. Again, Egypt and other countries as well, South Africa and countries in West Africa, but Egypt will have a track record when it comes to infrastructure. Egypt spent $400 billion on the infrastructure. We all see the road, not only the roads, tunnels across Suez Canal, the railways. So definitely there is a lot can be shared, and Africa cannot progress without having infrastructure. Let me give you an example. Egypt have 300 megawatt of electricity available to export to Sudan, for example. Currently, it's about 80. It's increasing, but because needed some infrastructure upgrade in the Sudan side, we export electricity to Libya, we export to Jordan. Now, we have signed the agreement with Europe to export Egyptian electricity to Europe mainland via Cyprus and Greece. In October of last year, agreement was already made with Saudi to link with Saudi and the GCC countries. So we have in the North Africa, when it comes to energy and access, and also with the green energy, and I think having COP27 planned in November, Egypt is presenting Africa. We have all the ingredients to basically support the rest of African countries in improving the infrastructure, and with financial institutions, strong financial institutions like the African Bank and African Development Bank and the rest of the African institution will help the rest of Africa on investment in the infrastructure.
Yes, this may not be quite related to the bank meeting and all of that, but there were plans of creating a railway system connecting, the top of the African continent to the bottom of the African continent. Is this plan still in place, and is it still possible despite the challenges when it comes to the transport system in many African countries?
It is happening. Cairo, Cape Town, and it is happening. I think Egypt is we are almost done with. Still, of course, some challenges in the rest of the African countries. We want to see Dakar, Mombasa. We want to see Egypt, Cape Town. We all would like to have a train to go to Tunisia, to Libya. I mean, it's very important to have this infrastructure, and actually it's all been discussed in the meeting. It was also a good opportunity that everybody realizing how important that Africa rise, because this is basically the Africa we want in 2063. We have no option but to make that change.
So will this freedom of movement also help in building economies? I mean, and is there also a plan to remove restrictions when it comes to movement between one country to another?
So this is all about the African continent free trade agreement. As I said earlier, 43 countries signed out of 55, and they had an issue with product origin. I think, if I'm not mistaken, they agreed on 88% of the origin of the product. So you will have a free movement of goods. We have a lot of existing agreements, but this AFC FTA is the first one we have the COMESA, we have the ECOWAS in West Africa, where South Africa and South African countries have their agreement as well. So this is a new platform where this is a huge market. We talk about 1.3 billion people. So with all the improvement in the infrastructure, the no tariff on the goods, we want, and for me, it's also required a changing of a mindset, changing of a mindset of the consumer. You and I, we need to be proud starting buying products made in Africa.
Yes.
And also the manufacturer have to come up with a high standard,
Yes.
competitive, innovative product for the African people as well.
Yes. Do you think that by 2063 that the possibility of not just movement of free goods, but could we also see in Africa of a more European Union style state where there is a freedom of movement for people as well?
I think that will lead to that. The trade before the colonized and all of that, people were moving from one country to another because they were trading. The trade, you manufacture, industry, I think that will lead to, and I hope before 2063 we'll have a free movement
Yes.
of the African people across the entire continent.
Yes. Can you tell us a bit about the countries that are, less privileged than in Africa, and what kind of problems they may be facing that a Frixium bank can actually help in solving, like, for instance, poorer countries like Angola and so forth?
Well, I think the agreement, and I'll quote the IMF report,
Yes.
that the free trade agreement will significantly improve the having less poor people, so
Yes.
the poverty in the continent will definitely
Yes.
decrease, and again, great economy like China came with the SMEs, so
Yes.
SMEs definitely will be also another thing to improve the
Yes.
economy of the country. I don't like to say poor and rich. I think we in Africa have to be mutually work together.
Yes, definitely.
And by the way, if
We're all developing countries.
we are all developing country. So if you look at, we have the natural resources.
Yes.
We have the gold, we have the rare earth metals, we have all the resources. So we are developing. We all need each other. There is not one better than the others.
Definitely.
And that's the merit of the agreement, mutual benefit. We need to work together.
Yes. Will there also be some sort of investment, not just in industries, but also investments in the human capital itself, like investments in education and healthcare? Very
important. You cannot have good industry or good trade without a qualified people. I think a lot being said about investment in education, investment in the healthcare. And one of the slogan was used in the meeting is the power of youth.
Yes.
And power of youth, they are more qualified when it comes to digital transformation. This is, and we need to create the ecosystem for the free trade agreement among all the African countries to work. And fundamental part of the ecosystem is the human capital development, along definitely with the health care. We should be proud in Egypt of what we have done. If we talk about this 100 million Sahha initiatives, there is we will talk about virus C. Now we don't hear about it because we are free of virus C. So I think Africa can, and again, Egypt and other African countries have a track record, can share their experience with other African countries.
You were speaking about youth empowerment. Is part of youth empowerment somehow cutting red tape for these young people to create their own small businesses and creating incubator systems as well for these businesses?
All of the above, absolutely. Yes. And we need to trust the youth. We need to trust them, empower them, and create incubators for the youth, for the women, for the young entrepreneur. Definitely, we have to encourage that, because this is the only way Africa will rise.
Yes. Can you also tell us about, is there like some sort of policy of how they're going to tackle this when it comes to youth empowerment by cutting red tape? Do they have ideas about what these incubators will be? For instance, the amount of funding that each person could have? Is this something that was discussed?
It was discussed. I don't have the details, but definitely it was discussed. And incubator is necessary. Part of it is human capital. You train the people, you support the people. I visited in North America and Canada actually 2 weeks ago, one of this worldwide incubator, and they came to Egypt last year, and they are talking about having the similar incubator in the other African countries. So I have seen in that incubator a lot of new startup and new of young entrepreneur, and how the incubator helps them. So your comment is definitely valid, and it was discussed to have more of these incubators available in African country to help all the youth and the women as well.
Do you think, sir, that maybe one of the plans or future plans could be creating some sort of regional scholarships for young students to learn, not necessarily abroad, but maybe other universities around the African continent?
Very good question. I think, by the way, Egypt has actually a university in Alexandria for the French-speaking countries, and I visited actually a couple of months ago, and there is a lot of postgraduate. I think we need to improve the educational. I like your question. I would like to talk about sending our kids to South Africa, South African to send their kids to Egypt. We used to have in 60s a lot of African, and we still have, with of course Al Azhar being the oldest university in the world, but definitely with West Africa. And I lived in West Africa and Nigeria for 10 years, and there is very highly educated people. The university in Nigeria, for example, very advanced. So I think, back to what I said earlier, it's a changing of mindset. We need to improve the educational system, but we don't want to, yes, we'd still send people to Europe and to state for education, but the mindset has to change to have the upgrade the educational system, like you said, a regional education system where we can send our kids.
And South Africa has also very good universities.
Absolutely. South Africa, Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, definitely. Kenya, definitely.
Do you think that these programs could also help in bridging cultural differences from one country to another?
True, but
we're obviously all African, but we're still different as people.
But different is good. Diversity is healthy.
Yes.
There is nothing wrong with diversity. Diversity is healthy. Yes, but there is a lot of culture similarities among the African countries, and I think what gives Africa its flavor, the diversity, north, east, south, west. So, and definitely will help the culture development of the continent as well.
Well, unfortunately, sir, we're out of time, and we hope that the African continent has a bright future to come, where everyone rises up together. So, Dr. Hussien Al-Ghazzawy, an energy and industry expert, thank you so much for joining us
Thank you
this
very much.
evening. Thank you. This brings us to the end of this episode of Business Insider, but stay tuned for more on Nile TV.